I call this meeting of the Town of Clayton Board of Adjustment to order. Our first item is the approval of the January 17th Board of Adjustment meeting minutes. I trust everyone has had a chance to review those as they were in your packets. Do we have any corrections or comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second, any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Item 3, evidentiary hearing, 2023-162, variance Aldi's.
Recuse myself.
Yes, Mr. Perricone is recused.
Chair, before we start with the next item, is it possible we could do a roll call for the board to ensure we have a quorum?
Absolutely.
Great. You got Chair Bizzle
Here?
and Board Member Antoine,
Here.
Board Member Barry, Board Member Perricone,
Here.
Board Member Wiggins,
Here.
and Board Member Warta.
Here.
And Councilwoman Anderson is excused from today. Thank you.
Okay, so that means all 5 members will be voting. And Mr. Attorney, do you have any instructions before we open the hearing? Would you like to go over anything?
Turn your mic on. Sorry. Thank you, Michael.
There you go.
Yeah.
And is the applicant here represented by an attorney or no attorney? Attorney? No attorney. The only thing to really keep in mind here is that there is a formal ethics opinion adopted by the State Bar that says that it is the unauthorized practice of law to for a corporation to send a representative for this hearing. Not saying you can't proceed, but that is something that is on the books. Take it as you wish.
And with this being an evidentiary hearing, those testimony is sworn testimony. We need to swear in all the.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Any questions for the attorney? All right. I'll open the public hearing and ask that anyone wishing to be heard, please stand and be sworn in by staff.
If I can ask the applicants to do the oath, please raise their right hand and staff will do so also for the record. I do solemnly affirm that the testimony I'm about to give is true to the best of my knowledge and belief. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. We'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the new members, we're just going to reiterate, this application for the variance came in prior to the adoption of our new UDO, so this will still be reviewed under the UDC. And I just wanted to highlight the town of Clayton's UDC findings of fact found in section 155-716D2 A through D. It states that no variance shall be approved by the Board of Adjustment unless all the following findings are made. A is unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. B, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, topography, hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or general public may not be the basis for granting a variance. C, the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing property with knowledge that the circumstances exist that may justify the granting of a variance shall not be regarded as a self-created hardship. And finally, D, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. The applicant here today is proposing a setback variance from section 155-203K2, table A, table 2-1. This variance, this area B3, it requires a 30-foot rear setback, and the applicant today is requesting that this be reduced down to a 20-foot setback, as will be shown on the plan here. The current zoning is a commercial corridor commercial district, which is formerly B3, which is our commercial business along major thoroughfares. Existing uses, there's a vacant lots, and then as well, there's some older residential homes that I don't believe are being occupied. Just to show you here on the map, this does have the new designations from our UDO, but again, the red was the B3, now the corridor commercial. The dark green most adjacent to it there to the left, to the northwest, is residential medium density, which would have been our R8 zoning district that you may be familiar with. Here's just an aerial imagery currently of the site right now along Rose Street, Tulip Street, and Highway 70 there. The proposed variance would be along this property line here. That's considered the rear, where the rear setback would be. Here's just a general site plan kind of showing the overall layout of the proposal of the project at hand, but to highlight again, this is where this dashed line shows where that 30-foot setback is there. And currently the footprint of the building is actually within that setback. And this is the property line here. Here highlighted a little bit closer up, we can see that the purple dash here is that 30-foot setback. Again, the building's footprint is within it. And then the red is the new proposed 20-foot setback, which would allow the building to not be in that envelope. Some considerations for the Board of Adjustment shall review and make a final decision regarding the variance application. Conditions may be imposed regarding location, character, and other features as may be deemed by the Board to protect property values and general welfare of the neighborhood. And just for a reminder, the variance runs with the land. The applicant has a presentation, is prepared to speak on it too.
Thank you, Bruce. Any questions for staff? Okay. Hearing none, we'll call on the applicant. And I would just ask that you identify yourself and give us your address as well.
And if anyone speaking would please just sign in their name and the location, the address as well.
Good evening, Board. Chris Bostic with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh. With me tonight is Todd Bonnet with Aldi, the applicant. It's our pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to be giving the bulk of the presentation, but Todd's here to answer questions that may arise during the course of the presentation. So thanks again for having us tonight.
Absolutely.
First off, I want to mention, Kimley Horn is a site engineer. We're working with Aldi. We've worked with Aldi for many years, done several stores with them over the years. I'm a professional engineer in North Carolina, have 20 plus years of experience doing this type of work. As part of the presentation tonight, as Bruce mentioned, we're here to talk about 4 findings of fact. And I just want to hit on those 4 findings quickly. Number 1, and I'll try to be brief with this and not to bore everybody. Number 1, unnecessary hardship. So this property is a commercial corner. It is zoned for commercial. The adjacent properties are not zoned for it. There was a DOT right-of-way taking that reduced the width of this property, which is part of the justification for our unnecessary hardship. We believe that if we tried to meet the setback requirement for the town, that would result in a reduction of customer safety and would also reduce the functional aspect of the store as far as parking count goes and truck deliveries, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Second, hardship is peculiar to the property. So again, DOT taking property on Rose Street, that's peculiar. There's some significant topography between our site and the adjacent property, and the adjacent property is not zoned for commercial currently. So those are hardships peculiar to the property. Number 3, talks about the variance that we're asking for is not the result of owner actions. Again, just to reiterate, that was part of NCDOT's road project on Rose Street. That's nothing that the owner did. And number 4, as we'll talk about in more detail, the variance doesn't pose a threat to safety. All the other setbacks on the periphery of the property, we'll talk about that, are met. The required landscape buffers are provided around the entire property. So we do have some exhibits that we're going to flip through to talk about this in a little bit more detail. As Bruce mentioned, just to orient you again, and I'm getting used to this clicker. Oh, well, that's crazy. All right, very good. For purposes of this, north is to the top of the page, say west is to the left of the page. So as Bruce mentioned, to the south of the site is Sheets. It's just off the page to the south. Our property is composed of several residential structures today. Well, one of the residential structures has been torn down in conjunction with the road widening project. There is a residential house here. There is a concrete pad beside the house. And there is a shed behind the house. And this immediately abuts our property, just giving everyone some background. And then there's also a house that is on US 70 that is immediately adjacent to our property in the vicinity of where we are asking for the variance. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Okay, this is a further zoomed in view of the property line where the setback reduction is proposed. Here's the house next door. And then to the south, this is our property here. And again, to be clear, the only place that we're asking for a setback reduction is along the northern property line that is circled. All right. Now, the reason that we're asking for that setback is because of the changes that occurred on Rose Street. So this is an older aerial photo before construction started on Rose Street. And the red outline shows the previous existing property boundary for the site. Flip forward to somewhat present day. This aerial is fairly recent. You've got construction that's occurring on Rose Street. You can see the dirt. As you're going back to the west, the widening that's occurring in front of our property, and then the red outline represents the new outline for our property. And that effectively is a difference of 35 feet. So approximately a third of an acre of the property was lost due to the right-of-way expansion. And again, I just want to go back to the hardships that we're here to prove. The hardship is peculiar to the property, and it's not a result of any actions that we took. Site plan, which again, Bruce showed you earlier. A couple things to point out here. I think it's important to note. One is, we can go back to an aerial if you have questions about this, but if you look at the northern property line, there are several large trees that are going to remain, that are on that residentially zoned property, that are going to, again, provide some sort of buffer in addition to the buffer that we're providing adjacent to the store. Talking a little bit about the store itself, the main entrance to the store where customers will come in is located here at this corner. If you've been to an Aldi before, it's very typical for their locations. The carts where you can stick your quarters in and pull them out, that's located right here. And then Aldi typically has parking in the front of the store on both sides, and then a space in front from that front door where people can, they're deciding whether they're going to go in without a cart or they're going to grab a cart and get that. So that's this operating area here. So that's very important for Aldi. Another thing to point out would just be the truck loading operations. So, and I'll back up here for a minute too. So we've been working on this project for a pretty long time. We had our pre-application meeting with the town in February of last year. And one of the biggest items that we had to work out initially was access with the Department of Transportation. Rose Street was being widened, and we landed on having access off of Tulip Street, which is here, and then access off of US 70 here, which is both of which are limited access points. So for truck deliveries, the truck come down Rose Street, pull in, pull forward, and then it would back into this loading area here on the side of Aldi. This is also where the dumpster is located. Point out that the dumpster is actually separated by a portion of the Aldi building from the adjacent property to the north. So there's quite a big setback from where that dumpster would be. And it's again separated by a building. And then from a parking count standpoint, this is about the minimum number of parking spaces that an Aldi would typically have. They know their program. As you all know, they've built many stores around the country. And we have observed the buffers along Rose Street and the buffers along US 70. And this is, we have maxed out the number of parking spaces that we can have on the property and provide buffers everywhere else that are required. Landscape plan. Again, just to reiterate, and this goes to probably finding of fact 4, which talks about substantial compliance with the town ordinance and not posing a safety threat, safety issue or a nuisance. Around the entire periphery of the property, we are meeting all of the code requirements for the town. The town requires a 20-foot landscape buffer on the north side of the property. We're providing that 20-foot landscape buffer, which just coincidentally matches the 20-foot setback that we're requesting. Part of that buffer is also required to have a fence. So we also have a fence that's going to be along the northern portion of the property with the trees. Okay. And Bruce showed this to you earlier. I won't dwell on this one too much, but the purple line shows the currently ordinance required 30-foot building setback. And then we're showing you what the new setback would be that we're requesting is 20 feet. And again, we can provide the landscape buffer that's needed within that area. Here's just an enlargement of that landscaping. We've got 10 trees along that northern property boundary, 6-foot tall privacy fence within that buffer, and all those again are per the town requirements. This is another graphic that I thought would be helpful to show everyone. We took the exact same site plan that we have, and we laid it in as if the widening had not occurred on Rose Street. And this is what it looked like. So you'll see that we had if we had all that property to work with, the purple line represents where that 30-foot setback was. We would have had plenty of space to work with. And with the right-of-way taking on Rose Street, all of that has been pushed back. So I thought that might be a helpful visual for everybody. All right. This is just a updated site plan. This is the site plan overlaid on top of an aerial just to get your bearings again. I'll point out that our plan drawing showed those trees that would remain. And so you can kind of see those trees overlaid on the existing greenery that's out there. There are some big trees that are going to remain there between us and that northern property boundary. You can see I think you can see the shadow from the sun up there that kind of depicts how tall those are. I think I've got an exhibit in here too. Here we go, yeah. And same trees as you're standing on US 70 that'll be there. And in addition, so if you can imagine here, in addition to those, we would have the 20-foot landscape buffer and fence that's required as part of the town ordinance. So again, just to quickly summarize, and I'll go back here. I'm trying to. Here we go. Oh. Bruce, you have any idea why? I'm trying to go back up on. Yeah. Oh. Have I not gone back? Oh. It might have just died on us. Maybe. Can I do it on here? Oh. It's easily there. I think that's fine right there. Great. That one? That's correct. Yep. Thank you. So again, to summarize, we do feel that requesting the variance, we have a hardship that we're trying to overcome with the adjacent properties being zoned residential. So it's not like we can just buy additional property. That would require rezoning. We have a parking count that we're trying to keep. We're trying to keep our customers safe at the front entrance. hardships peculiar to the property because of the DOT taking, the adjacent residentially zoned property. These were not actions of the property owner. And then, as we've noted, we meet all of the landscape requirements for the town of Clayton around the periphery. We're asking for one reduction of a setback along one property line to be able to build this. So we do believe that we're not posing a safety threat, nor do we believe that, we do believe that we're in compliance with the intent of the town's ordinance. And we're here to answer questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Chris. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I think that we need to just take a second here and take note of the fact that there are two alternates now sitting here that I think will be voting. Is that correct? As part of the hearing, we have one recusal. I think we have a panel of 5 voting. I just want to make sure that's clear and it's part of the record before we commence any further, just so that everybody knows that there is an odd number and we can make a vote that will be one way or the other here potentially. So just want some housekeeping there. But other than that, I did have a couple questions if you could entertain them. One of them, primarily, I think that this centers around the timing of the purchase, the DOT notice, and how the setback relief is being sought. So could you just tell me, or cartoon on a calendar, how these events came to pass or when they did?
Sure. So, like I mentioned before, we came in with a pre-application meeting in February of last year, and it was our understanding, so we were brought in as the engineer. Aldi had been looking at this property for a much longer period of time. And our understanding was that there were improvements that were going to occur on Rose Street. But my understanding is that during the course of the time that we've been working on the project, DOT has actually taken that property.
Okay, so just to put a point on it, when was the property acquired?
It has not been by NCDOT?
No, this proposed site from Aldi.
Yeah, so Aldi has not purchased the property yet. It is under contract to be purchased.
Ah, interesting. Okay. When did you make submission on the engineered drawings?
So again, broadly speaking, we did a traffic study in March of last year, which dealt with securing and coming to an agreement on what the access points were with the town and NCDOT. And then in September, we submitted for the variance and for the site plan review.
Okay. When did the notice for the DOT improvements go out?
I don't know exactly when the notice for the DOT improvements went out. I think that the right-of-way was taken by NCDOT in the middle of last year.
So you're saying that the due diligence period, did you sign a letter of intent, or is there some kind of commitment to the property on the landowner?
We are under contract. I can't speak to the date that we went under contract on the property.
Was it in February or March of last year?
I really don't know. Unfortunately, I wasn't involved with the purchase agreement at that time. The
Okay.
guy that has actually left the company, so kind of taking this over.
Okay. Do the, so you can't pinpoint a timeline on when the contract or perhaps a letter of intent was initiated, when the drawings started or when the notice from the DOT?
I can go to my phone and try to check the file.
It might be helpful.
And again, just to reiterate,
Check with someone.
yeah. So we were going through our engineering due diligence on the property. So the first thing we did was look at traffic. And so that February, March timeframe that I was referencing is when we started that. That process took 3-4 months. We got comfortable with that. And then we proceeded with making application to the town for the variance and the site plan review.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Questions?
Yes, and so I want to go back to what Tom, the line of questioning, and kind of point back to something you had said. You were aware before you started doing that of the Rose Street improvements, correct? At that time?
Yes, in general, yes, correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, Chris, as far as, and you've answered quite a few of the questions I had, but going back to the landscape buffer in the rear, you described that very well. Are you proposing any additional landscaping or anything to help mitigate this variance request?
We currently are not. As I mentioned, there is a fence, which is the code requirement, but I do think that, we're standing here very hopeful that we can, obtain a variance because there are many things associated with the layout that we would like to see happen. So we're certainly, willing to hear feedback as it relates to that. Could more plants be planted back there? Yes. I mean, I can tell you that for certain, that you could add additional density back there if that was something that the board wanted to see.
Okay, and just to clarify, without the variance, you cannot meet the minimum parking requirements set in the UDO.
That's correct. And in fact, with the current UDO, the UDO allows for a 10% reduction in the required parking, and we're taking advantage of that. So we're actually, we wrote a letter that justifies that this number works for Aldi, which it does. This is the number that they like to see for their store to, operate and be able to operate well at peak times of the year too.
Gotcha.
I have an additional question. So the question at hand is the north, just that north line, and it's kind of set in on this diagram that you're showing here. The northwest portion that kind of comes down at a 90-degree angle from that one line that you're asking for the variance. It appears that property, as you said, they have a structure that is literally abutting. It's really more evident on the second page of the first diagram, but yeah, right there. You've got your hand right on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Considering that it's so very close as well, is that not, and this might even be a better question for staff, is that not of any consideration here either as well? That's not part of this consideration?
I think I can answer that, and then staff can certainly jump in otherwise.
Okay.
I think the way the ordinance is written, it doesn't really address whether there's a structure next door at the property line or 50 feet away. They're just making provision as to how far we have to be set back on our property.
Okay.
And we are fully compliant along that edge with the town ordinance.
The northwest.
Yes, ma'am.
edge.
That's right.
Okay, so what is at hand is just the red line there,
Just on the north side, that's right.
right, that is very close to their property. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for the applicant? Guess, do we have any clarification on
I have one more question real quick. So I noticed there was a neighborhood meeting attendance.
Yes, sir.
Can you maybe be truthful about what was the feedback from this proposal from the, it looks like there was 7 people at the meeting, one from Aldi and maybe you as well, I think in the Raleigh area. So do you know what the feedback was from the general public about this?
Sure. Well, first off, it was well attended. The folks that attended are the folks that own the property here, the folks that own the property here, and then there was a representative of a business that was noticed across the street. And the feedback, the questions that we got, were related to what was going to happen to Tulip Street, because Tulip Street is currently a very narrow road. I'll put my highlighter on Tulip Street. Narrow road, we're going to build that to town standards. And that seemed to make the folks that own the properties here happy because they're getting a better street to their properties. And then Mr. Eisenhower is the person who owns this property adjacent. He did attend the meeting, but to be perfectly frank, he didn't have a whole lot of questions. There was a lot of asking us to explain in detail what we were doing, but we didn't get a whole lot of pushback, to be perfectly honest with you, about anything at all at the meeting. And I'll add too that, I think that there's some discussion that those properties may become commercial properties in the future anyway. And I think some of the things that they were asking us at the meeting were related to those properties being commercial properties someday in the future too. That may not be relevant for the discussion, but I would mention that too.
If I could just, on the public safety side of things, can you explain to me what the requirements for the access on the turnout from what will be 42 and 70? Can you kind of run through that quickly? I just want to know what the turning radius, if you have, deceleration lanes or anything to that effect, if you could just kind of fill us in on those details, that'd be good.
I'm happy to. So on 70, this will be a right in, right out access. So if you're coming east on 70, we're building a right turn lane for folks to decelerate and be able to turn into the store. And then if you leave the store on 70, you'll only be able to turn right. And in addition to that, DOT was concerned about folks trying to come out of the store and weave over to the left turn lanes here. So we're going to have a concrete median that separates the left turn lanes from the through lanes. So when you turn out, you will come back to the traffic light and either go straight or you will turn right.
So those are some significant off-site improvements. Is that for passenger vehicles only, or I think you mentioned that the commercial truck shipping is coming around onto Rose?
That's correct. So, and I'll talk about Rose Street then too while you're asking. So again, same thing here. They'll be able to turn right into Tulip Street. You'll be able to turn right out, and folks will be able to come down the Rose Street extension further. And if they want to get back to 70, they can do a U-turn further down here. But there will be for both the Aldi and the Sheetz, Sheetz has this driveway here today. People will only be able to turn out right Sheetz because there will be a median in the middle. So to answer your question, the trucks will come in on Tulip. They'll pull in, pull forward, back up. I'm not following that path very well. And then come back out the way they came in, to answer your question.
I see where you're going. Now, this lower, the southwest section of this property line it's not a regular shape, right? This lot's not a rectangle. So you have this kind of a appendage here, so to speak, on the lot with the parking. How tight is that turning radius for a truck? I guess the question I'm asking is the 35-foot taking that occurred along Rose, how did that hinder your ability to make that turn? It looks like you might still be within the lot line just to the north of that appendage to the property. Were you able to make all that work?
Yeah, so first off, Aldi is always very concerned that their trucks can make the movements they need to make, because the last thing they need is a truck that's tearing things up that it doesn't need to be tearing up. So what you see here is, if you see this gap between parking spaces right here and that striping, that's a pretty wide area. That's probably like 60 or 70 feet. And that's giving the truck flexibility to make the movements it needs to make. And then the striping that you see right there with the cursor, that's also giving the truck the ability to pull forward far enough so that it can straight back in to the store. So, and those truck deliveries don't happen very often, but they need space to be able to do them, and we need to ensure that they can do them. Yes, sir.
That makes sense. Now, the setback on that appendage to the north, where we have that little What is that? Right in the elbow of the property. What's the yard setback and requirements right there? Right,
Right there.
no, down to the south?
Oh,
just
here.
Right there, that corner.
Yep.
Can you tell me what those two setbacks are and how they might or may not comply?
Yep, so those are compliant, and so that's also a 30-foot setback.
That is making the 30 foot?
Yes, sir, that is compliant. Yep.
Okay. And the other yard setback on the side there, just as you go to the north, right
here.
there.
Yep.
What is that compliant as well?
Yes, yes, sir. That's the one Miss Berry was talking about just a little bit, or that's the one she was asking about earlier.
Okay.
Yes, that is compliant. Yep.
All right. And then I think Ms. Berry was pointing to the fact that it doesn't appear that the existing structure meets the reciprocal setback from the other direction, but we know that predates what's going on here. So it's interesting, but noteworthy. It looks like you might have come up with a date.
So yeah, it looks like I can kind of back into it from when we got our approvals corporately. So it looks like we negotiated the letter of intent in January of '23.
Okay.
So that was when we kind of came to terms on the property.
When you negotiated that letter of intent, how soon thereafter or before did you realize that the DOT was taking this section of land in the front of along Rose Street?
I'm sorry, but I just wasn't involved with the
Okay.
project.
So when did the taking actually occur? I guess is the right question.
I think it happened, we became aware of it in the March, April timeframe of last year.
Okay.
I don't have the date of the actual, and it may have been a condemnation too. I can't remember. I don't know if they came to an agreement. Is it I don't know.
Most likely. I mean, we probably wouldn't have necessarily known those dates
Yeah.
since it went to the landowner.
Okay. And you proceeded with the transaction regardless of the fact of what was happening on Rose. Is that correct?
Right. It's still under contract. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
we have to qualify it to make sure we can build a store before we can buy it.
Gotcha. All right.
And just for the record, could I get your name and address as well?
Sure. Sorry. My name's Todd Bonnet.
Okay.
And my address is 1985 Old Union Church Road, Salisbury, North Carolina.
Okay, thank you very much.
You bet.
I just want to clarify, so the March or April, that was when it was taken by DOT, or that's when you learned about it?
That's when we learned about it.
And Chris, it's a little bit difficult, but I think just so I'm clear, the curb gutter and sidewalk on Rose Street, Aldi's is constructing that. That's not part of this DOT project. Is that correct?
The curb and gutter is being constructed by DOT. The sidewalk is being constructed by Aldi.
Okay, thank you.
But you also had mentioned the off-site improvements with the median and the barrier for the turning lane going eastbound on 42. That's being built by Aldi?
That's correct. Eastbound on 7, that's correct, yes.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. I think I have one question for staff. If we obviously know we've got the old code, the new code. Is there a discrepancy in the rear setback, or would it have been 30 regardless? Do we know?
It would be 30 regardless. Yeah. As far as given the fact that it is currently abutting the residential, it would be a larger setback in addition to having to have that Class C or that opaque buffer as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
One more question for staff, if I may. What would be, if all these adjoining properties were zoned commercial, would that change the setback requirements? The adjacent property?
Yes, board member, 1 second, I'll pull that exactly up for you. I apologize. I've been jumping around as the conversation moved.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Nope, you're good, not a problem. Happy to help.
I think it doesn't matter.
So Mr. Bostic is right. So what it was is our former UDC had a foot number, which would be 30 for as a rear setback. And then we also had in parentheses, if it were to be a budding residential, and it also happens to be 30 feet as well. So it was 30 all around.
Okay, my question was a little bit different. If the property, residential properties directly to the north were commercial,
I understand.
yeah,
The setback would not change. The type of buffer would change. They would not be required to provide that opaque screening if it was like zoning.
okay. So it's more restrictive, the fact that it's residential because of the screening, but not necessarily because of the footage of the setback.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, that's helpful. Thank you.
And Bruce, I know we talked about the buffer and described it as 20 feet. Is that a type ABC? Which one?
So under the former UDC, that would be a type C,
Type
which
C.
has the option for 10, 15, or 20 feet. The number of plantings does vary by the width of the buffer. And it does require either a berm or some type of opaque screening, a continuous hedge, or a 6-foot wall or fence.
Gotcha. Last question for staff, for me, hopefully, is these variance requests, are they reviewed by TRC? And I guess specifically has fire and building code inspections, have they reviewed this?
It is submitted for TRC approval. So in buildings and inspections is currently undertaking the fire portion of it, and then engineering also looks at it as well.
Okay. Any feedback from them from I guess I'm thinking more of a fire code? Do we have any feedback from the fire department?
Currently, the project is still under TRC review for the Aldi itself. As far as for the variance, I can't speak to any type of review that they gave. There weren't many comments, if anything, from the other departments, but they did review it, and they're currently still reviewing the site itself.
Okay. And the site plan as submitted, it is, we're seeing that now with the setback reduction shown.
You were seeing it there, currently going in review with them encroaching on the setback.
Okay.
So they're being reviewed under that, and they're aware that that may change if they are not granted the variance.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Okay, any more questions for staff?
I have a question for staff. How unique is this residential property on that strip? So I know on down, there's another section of commercial properties. How far does the residential properties extend along that same line going north? I only ask because the neighborhood meeting, there was the Eisenhowers who own that property appeared to have inquired about future zoning. And so my question is, how unique is that residential property there?
So there's that residential property that fronts Highway 70, which we talked about there. The property going further up Highway 70 along that way is all along the frontage is already zoned for commercial business. And then there are apartments right directly behind those that are zoned residential, of course.
But directly fronting 70, this is a relatively unique property that is residential.
Correct. If you go all the way up to the Bowling Street, from there down to Rose Street, there is only one residential property zoned along 70 there.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
And again, the date on the application for the variance was what?
I can look that up and pull that up for you. I apologize. I do have the date for the site plan, which was in September. I think they were submitted around the same time, but I can easily
Okay.
get that for you.
That's fine. That's close enough. When was the variance application submitted to staff? All right, any other questions for staff before we close the hearing? All right, hearing none, I'll close the hearing and bring discussion back to the board. So I'll start. I appreciate Board Member Antoine's questions on the timing. That was one of the bigger questions that I had, and I think I'm clear on that a little better than I was. And I think it's very helpful to see what the site could have been developed with without the taking of the right of way versus what they are left with now. I do struggle with the timing on everything, but I do know that with the right of way take, whether it was dedicated or taken by DOT, it is very difficult to meet those turning movements for not only the Aldi supply trucks, but the fire trucks, that kind of thing. So there is, being a commercial site, it does come with a lot of internal movements that make that very difficult. I am glad to hear that the landscaping along that property line does include a fence, and that they are meeting the landscape requirements for the town's buffer. I'm not a real big fan of adding additional plantings because you can choke them out. You can have too many plantings. So I think, as far as screening for the adjacent property there, I think that's probably adequate. It's good that they're not asking for a reduction in the landscape buffer there. So those are just some thoughts that I had, but.
No, I agree with you. I am in the same mind that you are, Marty, that the timing is problematic, but I think that my primary concerns regarding the safety of this particular plan are things that they're doing are helpful. Obviously, it's expensive to have the offsite improvements, particularly with the buffer into the left-hand turning lane as they're traveling southbound on 70. There's a deceleration lane and a right out as well. I think that helps quite a bit. I was concerned about the fact that it looks tight along Maple, but really that portion of the project is compliant with the code as designed. And I think from a public safety perspective, this meets the intent of what the town of Clayton is trying to accomplish under the UDO. The only question in my mind is whether or not this intrusion, really by 10 feet of the side or backyard, one of the side yards essentially is the only thing that's at issue at the moment. Everything else seems to be fine from my perspective.
I think that, infrastructure improvements are what we want, and it's unfortunate that now it's kind of creating a domino effect. But, we have to think about what other uses are going to be put on this same property, and I don't know that, considering what's across the street and what's down the road, this seems like a fairly small ask for such a I hate to say beneficial, something that the town could use on that side of town. So, I think it's an unfortunate thing that it doesn't meet the setback, but why it needs the setback or why it needs the variance is because of something that's an improvement, just better infrastructure.
Any other discussion? Question for the attorney. This is a variance request, so it needs a 4/5 vote. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. Okay, so with that, if there's no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to vote on the variance of Aldi 2023-162.
You have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Perricone, you can join us again. Okay, I see on our next agenda, item on our agenda says adjournment, but we have new business behind that. So I guess we won't adjourn. We'll go out of order and go to new business, prepare to vote for new chair and vice chair of the Board of Adjustment at the March 20th, 2024 meeting date. Conrad, you have something to add to that?
That is, yeah, I appreciate you letting me speak to the room full of folks rather than when everyone's emptying out. Appreciate that, Chair Vizzle. So this is just a reminder that at your next meeting, you'll have the findings of fact, hopefully prepared and ready for this, your motion today. And then we'll have the election of your chair and your vice chair position. So just be prepared for that and think about who you like to nominate and go from there. So that's my only update. So thank you.
Okay. Just positions in the planning department, everything filled?
Oh, great question. This week we interviewed about 12 candidates for our planning technician. We did some phone screenings out of a pool of about 54 that were submitted, and we're moving forward with 3 additional applicants. So if anyone that applied and is listening to this will know where they fell in that whole kind of scheme of things. Really good candidate, very competitive process. I'm very excited with it. Staff's worked very hard to screen these applicants. So we're hoping to we're having 3 confirmed interviews next Monday, and we'll make a final decision shortly after that. So we have a planning technician position that we're filled. We still have a vacancy in our senior planner position, and we'll be moving forward with that hopefully sometime soon. But we're getting there.
That sounds
Yes, sir.
good. That sounds great. All right. With that, we'll jump back up to item 4 for adjournment. So entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Good evening.